The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, America. Good morning, world. Good morning, CHD. Welcome once again. I'm Michael Kane, the Director of Advocacy here at Children's Health Defense. We have an exclusive interview today, Fauci's Unanswered Questions. Mary Holland sat down with Senator Ron Johnson in an exclusive interview right after the now legendary and infamous Fauci hearings of pleading the fifth. I'm very excited to get to that. And then also live with me will be Mary Holland, the CEO of Children's Health Defense, to discuss the interview, to discuss recent developments, this watershed moment of COVID justice, a reckoning finally coming, and to discuss CHD in DC. We are headed back to Washington, D.C. on September 17th. We have Senator Ron Johnson, Senator Rand Paul, Representative Paul Gosar, Lara Logan, Tony Lyons, Sayer G, so many already confirmed and more to come, going to Washington, D.C. with all of this breaking news, with all of these developments. We're going to be having a vote in Congress, in the Senate, this week about whether Fauci will be found in contempt of Congress. So going to DC in September, there's going to be a lot of breaking news to discuss. If you go to childrenshealthdefense.org, click right on CHD in DC. You could get all the information, get your tickets, reserve your hotel room. It is going to be fantastic. The link will also be in the show notes. Oh, there it is, chdconference.org. Go right there. We just have a few quick news items, so much news breaking right now before we get into this exclusive interview with Mary Holland and Ron Johnson. From the hearing, this blew me away the most, for me personally. Historic image. Look at this. Standing behind Anthony Fauci, Senator Bernie Moreno says, stand up if you were vilified for not believing the 6-foot rule, if you were fired for not getting the COVID shot. We have CEO of CHD, Mary Holland there, Giorgio, the director of development for CHD, CIA whistleblower, Jim Erdman. We have Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long. We have Fox News, Lara Logan there. What a moment. And when Senator Bernie Moreno asked Fauci to just turn around and look at them, he refused to do so and invoked his Fifth Amendment right over 100 times, as everybody knows now. Right the same week as this happened, over 500 fired workers in New York City sent a letter to Mayor Zoran Mamdani requesting dialogue and action for return to our jobs. That's getting hundreds of thousands of views out there on social media. We have independent media who has been challenging Zoran Mamdani on this, trying to get answers from him, just on the record statements about it that have not happened. We will be having some of those media voices in New York City here on CHDTV in the near future to discuss how the media is still the problem. The media is still the problem to this day. And lastly, a lot of you might have seen an apology went out to Kyrie Irving. I was very blessed in 2022 to be introduced to Kyrie Irving from Tremel Thompson, who actually we went to Barclays Center. And here is Stephen A. Smith, who apologized to Kyrie Irving. Tremel's friends with Stephen A. Smith as well, too. Tremel has been on Stephen's platform recently as well. I'm going to have Tremel here on CHDTV to talk through these things and these new developments. The Stephen A. Smith apology is critical. I see a lot of people saying too little, too late. Where were you? We need more converts. Stephen told a really interesting story. He was hospitalized over COVID. He thought he was going to die. So we have to remember that people are coming from different places about this. And for someone hospitalized over COVID, thought he was going to die, to say, Kyrie, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. You were right. That shows what's happening here. We need more of that. We need to welcome people who admit they were wrong, not chastise them and push them away. It's not too little, too late. We're just at the beginning of this. We were really, truly at the beginning of this. So shout out to Stephen A. Smith, Tremel Thompson, who's actually helped pave the way on all of this, from Kyrie to Stephen A. Smith and his connections. Okay, so now with that, before I bring Mary Holland on live to discuss all of these things, here is for the first time her exclusive interview with Senator Ron Johnson in Washington, D.C. on July 29th, just after the now infamous Fifth Amendment Fauci hearings. Let's show that interview.
Senator Johnson, thank you so much for meeting with us. So today was the hearing with Dr. Anthony Fauci, no longer in the government. How did you think that the hearing went?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you can get in so you can see it firsthand, because it was something to behold. Dr. Fauci was really between a rock and a hard place, because if he testified truthfully, he'd just further incriminate himself. And if he lied, he'd subject himself to more legal jeopardy. I think it was an incredibly important hearing. I give Chairman Paul a great deal of credit for just pursuing all these records, getting the diary, putting those out for the public so that we have crowdsourcing. I didn't get the diary. We just got it, I think, might have been yesterday. But we've had access to it through the reading room. And I'm just so glad that there's so many people kind of crowdsourcing the information. So in a very rapid time, we call the hot docs, the really important ones. But I think there's so much more to uncover. You start combining what documents we've got now from the devices that got turned over to us last Friday with the 11 million pages we have. This is a rigorous investigation, and we're just beginning, because we only just now got the documents. Our April 29th report, which the media is completely ignoring. I mean, they are. We're starting to interview the CDC and FDA employers. By the way, they're completely unrepentant. At least they're not pleading the fifth, but they might as well. They're really not. I mean, there's nothing you can show them that would shake their confidence in these injections. It's like, no, you look at swine flu, for example. There are about point million doses over about 3 months, 400 to 500 cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome, about 30 deaths. About 30 deaths. They pulled it.
Right.
You compare that to COVID, where in the first year you had over 1 million adverse events reported, and 21,600 deaths. I think it doesn't even. I mean, literally within days you had, or a couple of weeks, the contractor who inputs the VAERS reports, their worst case scenarios for 1,000 a week. Well, take 1 million adverse reports and divide by 52 weeks. I mean, it vastly exceeded their worst case estimates. So again, there were so many questions I wanted to ask Anthony Fauci. It was frustrating that we couldn't get any answers out of him whatsoever. But the more important thing is I was literally inundated with people saying, you got to ask him this, right? Which just shows there are so many unanswered questions that the American public deserve answers to, and quite honestly, only people like Anthony Fauci can provide them. And if they continue to hide under the fifth.
He does seem unrepentant as well. It seems like from the diaries, I mean, this man really was absorbed in his own celebrity and didn't seem to be really particularly interested in what was happening to the American public or others. And yet, today, the Democratic senators seem to be flattering him.
Saint Fauci. Well, it's still Saint Fauci. I thought Bernie Moreno did a pretty good job saying, I can hardly wait to run the ads.
Yeah.
Because, again, you could not have looked at that hearing. You could not have listened to Chairman Paul's opening statement. You could not have listened to Josh Hawley just devastate him in terms of laying out the fact that he used government employees' resources to solicit over $1 million in award prizes for these awards. I mean, again, we saw that was the first time I saw that with the you started hearing about that, but Josh dug deeper and found out all these employees that had made solicitations on his apartment. For my part, what I was trying to do is raise the public awareness of what the legacy media is not covering. The revelation on Peter Marks, the fact that they were diagnosing and treating injection injured, and they kept it silent, even though they admitted early interventions is crucial.
You talked about Dr. I mean, so important. They hit it So it did seem like the mainstream media changed a little bit last night. We started to see CBS, the New York Times, coming out critical of Tony Fauci at first. Do you think this opened the door to the mainstream media at all?
Staff sent me a supposedly hit piece on Anthony Fauci from The Atlantic. It's like, I said, man, this author is drinking gallons of the Kool-Aid, you know? He's got to be drowning in it. I mean, so has Washington Post returned their Pulitzer Prize on the Russian collusion hoax? I mean, that's what we are dealing across the board is nobody is willing to admit they're wrong. Whether it's, you know, on the injections, whether it's, you know, getting it themselves, or, you know, none of these government officials or medical doctors, they won't admit they're wrong in pushing this or mandating or coercing people to take these things. News media is not going to admit it was wrong in putting all their hopes and dreams behind Fauci. It is interesting. I thought one of the, again, there's so many things I was prepared for, couldn't get to, but there is one diary entry where Anthony Fauci is relaying how Trump just went off on Deborah Birx, and this was pretty early on, like March or April. Yeah. So you guys are destroying the economy. You know, so you could tell Trump was pretty upset right off the bat. And I've heard about the internal squabbles. Mm-hmm. You know, I have my own story about Anthony Fauci. We were on a Senate conference call, and you know, Fauci was on it, and this is where they were contemplating the shutdowns. And my question to Fauci was, Dr. Fauci, I mean, you're recommending these shutdowns. I mean, do you understand the devastation that will cause to your economy, to people's lives? And just cavalierly he goes, Senator, that's not my department. That's somebody else's responsibility. It's very similar to Francis Collins when I confronted him in April of 2021. And you know, this was, I think the number was, there were already 2,926 deaths, okay? Reported on VAERS. And I said, are you watching VAERS? And so, yeah, I mean, you know, we've attributed 6 of those deaths to the Johnson, you know, clotting in women of childbearing age. So what about the other 2,920 deaths? Senator, people die. That's how uncurious they were about. Again, as I've pieced this whole thing together with Peter Marks being warned about the masking and the safety signals with the algorithm, how they continue to use that algorithm, this is just supposition. But I've got to believe, you know, they authorized this thing. This was their dream. This was Anthony Fauci's dream. Absolutely. Yeah, so you got a universal vaccination program. We talked about it at the Milken Institute with Rick Bright, right? Yep. So they had this dream. They issue this thing, and again, I don't think they thought this was going to be this harmful, but they start watching VAERS getting overwhelmed. You know, the worst case scenario, 1,000, they're getting 10,000. Okay, they're seeing these deaths. They have to be freaking out. They have to be freaking out until they saw that Portland storm, their algorithm. It's like, we just keep using this. We're going to keep using it because we say we have to, because we can't be inconsistent, and then we can go lie to the American public and say, but we're just not seeing safety signals. It's because they're just being masked. And again, every day they're lied, it just compounds the problem, right? I mean, now you've lied for 1 day, now 2 days, now a week, now 5 weeks, now 7 months, now 3 years. And so they will never admit they're wrong. And that is, you know, for me, it's unbelievably frustrating. I don't think they ever will. So about all we can really do is continue to gather evidence, lay it out in just irrefutable form. I think that's what this hearing did today. It's like, yeah, he didn't answer any questions, but that just gave us the opportunity for him not to filibuster. And, you know, I combine, you know, my 10 questions into kind of one, you know, disclosure of this truth, you know, with one question to have him plead the fifth.
You mentioned towards the end the hospital protocols, and that that's something you're focused on, and that you're going to subpoena him for that.
Well, we're just going to subpoena him. Yeah. Well, we're going to invite him first. The letter shouldn't have gone out, or will go out. So, you know.
Yes.
But we were going to do that anyway. We've interviewed a couple CDC employees. Now we're turning toward FDA employees, people still employed. But they're, you know, like Peter Marks, FDA employees have left government, and so we're going to issue those invitations today. Good. And based on what Fauci did, well, we're going to add, you know, a 5th invitation letter. Yeah. But you know, we're not going to wait around very long before we issue a subpoena.
Good. Anything else you want to tell our public that supports you tremendously?
There's tons of things, but no, I mean, you're talking about hospital protocols, so we're and just organically. People are talking about this, so they're kind of sending their testimonies to different people, and we're starting to get them. So I think last weekend I read probably the first 30 of them, and they're just, God, they're just heart-wrenching. The commonality of it is just unbelievable. So this is across states, different hospitals, take a loved one in unvaxxed, and the callous, the uncompassionate treatment's like, well, what, your dad's going to die. He's unvaxxed. And then the treatment's just like, no, you're going to be assigned to the death ward. And we are gonna do everything we can to force remdesivir down your veins. There were a couple of testimonies where these people were brought in with acute kidney injury, which would be you should not be giving remdesivir, which knocks out your kidneys. Still got remdesivir, and they died. It's so hard to read it when you see it happen time and time and time again at different institutions across the U.S. So I decided to have it as a public event rather than hearing, so I don't have to listen to the crap from the Democrats. I want these people to tell their stories. So we'll probably have, I'd love to have hundreds, but you just don't have time. But we'll hopefully have, couple dozen people. But I also want to have doctors. I want to have Attorney Ralph Laregio, if we can bring him in here to tell that story of. How he advocated for these families, the fights they fought, and where he's successful, they lived. Yeah, absolutely. Where he was unsuccessful, they died. It's okay. It wasn't a random controlled trial, but like I keep saying, they always say, VAERS doesn't prove causation. Okay, fine. But the Pilgrim study said about 1% of adverse events are reported. And when you look at the COVID deaths, when you have currently, this is 5.5 years running now, 24% of the over 39,000 deaths reported of VAERS occurred on the day of vaccination or 1 or 2 days. I'm thinking maybe that's, if it was my loved one when they're perfectly healthy and then died that day or within 2 days, I know what I'd blame. Just like if I were a parent who, perfectly healthy child, gets vaccinated and all of a sudden is a SIDS victim, right? And dying within 7 days, which a very high percentage of, as the removed paper lays out there. So you asked me have I got more to, I got all kinds of stuff to say.
Well, we're here to help in any way we can, especially in the hospital. We did the film Vax 3 Authorized to Kill, which is pretty, I think you watched it, but it encapsulates
and they're all hard to watch. They're hard to read testimonies.
It's very.
And again, I think we will have probably a public event in SIDS too. We'll do hearings, we will, but the Democrats are really, and it's not like they're obnoxiously disruptive, but they just, again, they disrupt the flow of the truth.
They won't.
Okay.
It's so sad to me, but they did not engage today at all in the inquiry. They only deflected it. And then what Blumenthal said, there was a campaign against science, and it's pretty breathtaking, actually.
Well, I would say he's correct from standpoint if he views like Anthony Fauci is Anthony Fauci's science. I would say that's probably true. There's probably a bit of a campaign against
I don't think that any dictionary does say science equals Dr. Fauci. But
well, Merriam-Webster, they changed their definition of vaccine.
I know they did. It's true. They haven't changed it to science yet.
Just have a little picture of
Yeah. Anything else you'd like to share?
Tons, but I think we're probably running out of time.
Okay. All right.
Thank you for everything you and your organizations do.
Thank you so much.
You're the leaders here.
We're so.
I'm a late comer to the party.
You're a critical piece of what has to happen to get to some kind of accountability, which I was happy to hear people talking about accountability. That's all we really, we're not going to bring people back to life, but we need to have the truth, and we need to have some kind of atonement for what happened. What happened was wrong.
I do hope people realize that, even if Fauci doesn't go to jail, that's really never been my goal. He's 85 years. I just want the truth known about Anthony. I don't want him going down in history as St. Fauci. I want him going down as he should, as probably one of the most infamous villains in American history, because that's what he is. When you take a look at the lives impacted by his arrogant, narcissistic dictates. The doctors' lives and careers destroyed. The gaslit injection injured who to this day cannot get treatment. Okay? It's just, It's going to take time.
So let's bring on right now the CEO of Children's Health Defense, Mary Holland. Mary, thanks so much for joining me today, and thank you for that amazing interview. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think the highest praise that I can give for Senator Johnson is there's a good man. He's really empathic. He really cares. He's really trying to put the truth out to the American people. And I wish I could say the same, Michael, for every member of Congress. But as you and I both know, it is extraordinarily rare. And it's such a privilege to really be supported by and supporting somebody who's doing that work in the Senate today.
Man, Mary, I agree with you so much. On June 10th, we had our first CHD Advocacy Day on the Hill. It would not have happened without Senator Johnson's office. And as you and I and others were saying, what is the focus going to be? It all of a sudden became so clear it had to be that April 29th report that he did on how the federal health agencies intentionally hid vaccine injury by using a flawed algorithm, something that nobody is championing except for Ron Johnson. And it was my honor to be able to work with his office and you and everybody and make that June 10th day focus in on this amazing critical work that he's doing. And now we're going back to D.C. September 17th. We have CHD in Washington, D.C. Ron Johnson's going to be with us. Rand Paul's going to be with us. Representative Paul Gosar, so many people, you, Mary, Brian Hooker, Polly, Tony Lyons, Lara Logan, so many people are going to be there. And, we've been talking a little bit about wow, we were just in DC. Should we be going back? Yes, we need to. We see the story is evolving with every day. There's new breaking news that just that doesn't stop. I'm excited to head back down there in September.
And absolutely, the momentum is on our side. Finally, Michael, it's been way too long, but the momentum is now on our side unequivocally. Even the mainstream has to deal with the fact that Tony Fauci was a liar. They haven't quite gotten to the point that he was a criminal, but they've now really turned a corner that he's a liar. And I just want to, mention that not only do we have the conference September 17th, but we have a dinner honoring Senator Ron Johnson on the evening of the 17th. And that's going to be a very special occasion. It's only the second time we've ever awarded a Defender Award. The first time was 2 years ago to Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So I think it's going to be a very special event, and we would love to see all of the people who are watching now at that event on the 17th.
Yeah, you can get your tickets at chdconference.org. You could also just go to childrenshealthdefense.org, see CHD in DC, click right on that. And get your tickets. You brought up, Mary, that the momentum is on our side. The media has to admit that, yes, Tony Fauci did lie. Well, we saw Secretary Kennedy on CNN recently anytime he said Fauci lied about everything, there could be no response. Nobody is responding to that after this 111th Fifth Amendment situation.
You know what, Michael? I also just want to mention one of the things. I was in the room. I was 2 rows behind Dr. Fauci's wife, Christine Grady. And one of the things that was so impressive, it was a small hearing room. I think Senator Paul did that intentionally so that it didn't get out of hand. There was overflow rooms. But what was really striking, especially clear when Senator Moreno said, stand up if you were adversely affected by COVID. Not every single person in that hearing room, except for Dr. Fauci's bodyguards and lawyers and wife, every single person stood up. In other words, this man who controlled science globally for the better part of 50 years, who had thousands of people grasping for dollars from the NIH and wanting to be in his shadow and get his accolades and be close to the master. There wasn't a single person supporting Tony Fauci in that hearing room. And that said to me loud and clear, the tide has really turned. There's nobody who's going to defend this man anymore, except his wife and his lawyers and his bodyguards. And that is stunning. When you go back to 2020 and he was Saint Fauci, as Senator Ron Johnson just said, he was the saint. He could do no wrong. People had the bauble dolls, they had the T-shirts, they had the cupcakes. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable.
when you saw the Democrats, as you and Senator Johnson said in the interview we just aired, just still fawning at Anthony Fauci during the hearing, not contributing to the inquiry, not asking any questions of Anthony Fauci, you didn't get the sense from them in that moment that the watershed moment had happened. But what they really needed was Anthony Fauci to speak back to them to keep the myth going. They needed his voice. They needed him defending himself. They needed him speaking, because let's face it, Anthony Fauci is a great spinmeister. I mean, he knows how to keep it going. But once 111, the Democrats that were saying what they said, everything they said fell flat. They needed Tony to speak back to them for anything to happen, and it didn't happen.
With one exception, Michael, and I want to note this, I didn't get the chance to do this with Senator Johnson, but I was impressed that Senator Fetterman not only put on a suit and tie, but he acknowledged that he had drunk the Kool-Aid, and he said, next time, I'm not going to fall for this. This isn't a partisan issue. This shouldn't have been hyper-partisan territory. And I was grateful to him. He broke ranks with the Democrats in that hearing. And I do think that was, Michael, that was like the keystone, right? That was breaking the dam among the Democrats. And that's significant, I think.
You are correct about that. That is significant. Not too long ago, on CHDTV, I talked about how Governor Josh Shapiro we called it stealing Maha, because when you really parsed it, he wasn't talking about medical freedom. He was playing a 3-card Monte game. But nevertheless, even Shapiro, who I'm convinced is being disingenuous, knows the Maha movement is critical, knows that basically there's been like a mini revolution in this country, right? And no violence or anything like that, but a revolution that no, I take care of my health because you're attacking my health. The federal health agencies and Big Pharma are actually attacking me. And our revolution has grown to such a huge point. It can't be denied any further. I think you're going to see more Democrats break. I think you're going to start to see them break on specific points. I think the liability shield is going to be a big issue, because you have many Democrats on the right side of the pesticide liability shield, right? Like Senator Booker correctly saying, no, we shouldn't be indemnifying chemical companies. But it's like, Senator Booker, do you see this other major corrupt corporate interest that has the vaccine liability shield? And he does see it. 65% of Democrats are against the vaccine liability shield now. So it is, for how long we've been in this, Mary, to be at this moment, I get a little giddy sometimes talking about it. It's amazing.
Yeah. And I do want to sort of throw an olive branch to some of the people in our movement, Michael, who say, that was theater. Like, of course, we've known it wasn't Tony Fauci. Of course, we've known all of this. That's all true. But I think one of the things that we should take a lot of satisfaction in is that it was Bobby Kennedy as secretary who got this information from 11 federal servers, got it to Senator Paul, the chair of the committee, who got it in front of the world. And then the media is actually having to deal with it. Those so-called diaries, which are not diaries, he was using federal computers. That's huge. It's not us speculating. It's not just looking at the actions or the behaviors. It's looking at the words of Tony Fauci himself, who is completely forked-tongued to his diaries. He says, I don't believe in the mask. I don't believe in the distancing. I don't believe in that it doesn't cross the placenta. I don't fall for the natural immunity lie. But then he goes to the public and he just lies through his teeth. And I just don't think anybody cannot see that anymore. It's not as out as widely as it needs to be, but the process has started, and you can't put this genie back in the bottle.
Oh, I agree. I agree completely. In the interview we just aired of you and Senator Johnson, when Senator Johnson was talking about a private meeting with Tony Fauci at the time. I believe it sounded like it was on Zoom. He had said, Dr. Fauci, you're recommending the country shut down. What is that going to do? Do you understand the carnage, the wreckage that is going to do? And Fauci's response was, that's not my department. Thankfully now we have Dr. Jay Bhattacharya heading the NIH, who has the medical background, also has a degree in economics, and understands health and the economy are not things that you completely separate, that you completely throw out. And there was one other from Fauci that we just found out about that hit me in particular is from the so-called diaries, his account on the federal server that he was documenting. He had talked about, man, the CDC better stop telling this accurate information that the vaccine isn't preventing transmission. That's really going to hurt the Department of Justice in their enforcement of vaccine mandates. So Rochelle Walensky, who headed the CDC at the time, not one of my favorite people, but she did say that publicly on mainstream TV multiple times. Now we see Fauci was mad at her for saying that and was working behind the scenes to even pull. But I mean, I'll give credit to Rochelle Walensky for this. She spoke the truth as she knew it at that time, as the data that was in front of her. But still, Fauci didn't want even that to happen.
Right. I mean, I think, he doesn't come out and say this in his diaries, but you can see it from what he says and everything he did. NIAID was an arm of pharma, full stop. I mean, I think most of NIH has been that. Most of CDC, FDA, sadly, they've all been pharma front organizations, but NIAID in particular, and Bobby Kennedy's book, The Real Anthony Fauci, that he wrote while at Children's Health Defense, makes that crystal clear. From really the beginning of the AIDS crisis, if not before, he turned NIAID into a drug incubation organization, putting out money to incubate new treatments, new drugs, new vaccines for infectious diseases and other diseases. And that's exactly what he did. Not anything that created vaccine hesitancy was wrong, was, forbidden. That could not be the mission of NIAID, even if vaccine hesitancy was exactly what you needed to do for your health. So we've learned, I think the public has learned something last week, Michael, and this weekend with Bobby Kennedy's bash up with Dara Bash. I think we're in a different place. I really do feel like we're in a different place than we were a week ago.
Yeah, I agree with that. Being able to say, as Bobby Kennedy has said for so long, and heading the federal health agencies, we're the sickest nation in the world. Our children are the sickest in the world. And the past 40 years of that was overseen by Dr. Fauci, who did exactly what you did: incentivize more drugs, incentivize more interventions, incentivize this incubation of vaccines and other things. That what have they done? Look at the record. They have made people sicker. And before we go, Mary, the last thing I want to talk about, talking about making people sicker, are the COVID hospital protocols that happened that, we documented so well here at CHDTV in VAX 3, going across the country and asking these questions to people and finding out, shockingly, it took me a little while for it to sink in for me, that those who were not vaccinated actually seemed to get different treatments in the hospital, actually seem to get treated differently than if they were vaccinated. And then, as Senator Johnson, who's going to be holding a hearing on this, is going to be holding an event in regards to this, talked about remdesivir and the problems that was happening. And as he said to Fauci's face, how nurses had called it run, death is near. This is the result of 40 years of public health failure. And it feels like intentional failure as well, too, where the profits were run up high over this whole time and health and well-being just bottomed out the whole time.
Yep. No, exactly right. And I support Senator Johnson not doing that as a hearing, doing it as a public forum, doing it on C-SPAN, so that people's stories of the tragic things that they experienced are not interrupted by people saying, essentially in so many words, "Oh, you're lying. That didn't really happen." The gaslighting is horrific, Michael. And of course, we've been dealing with this for decades in the childhood program, but we've been dealing with it in the COVID stuff. Oh, Dara Bash saying, the COVID shots protected, they saved hundreds, but for your misinformation. I mean, enough already, enough already. And I'm happy that right after this conversation, Michael, we'll have some more hospital protocol stories on CHDTV. I highly recommend that people go watch VAX 3, Authorized to Kill. It is an extraordinary compilation of information about what really did happen during COVID. The reason that we're so insistent on this at Children's Health Defense, Michael, and I know, you and I, among so many others, is we can't let this happen again. And this will happen again if we don't tell the truth about what just happened in COVID, but what happened with the childhood program. We're starting to tell the truth about what happened in AIDS, which was Tony Fauci's first caper at NIAID. So I'm very excited that I do believe we turned some kind of a corner. We won't know for time how far it is, but we're pushing. We're going to be back in DC. We're going to be honoring Ron Johnson, and I feel like there's real movement in what we're doing.
No, there absolutely is real movement. Children's Health Defense is going to continue our focus in Washington, D.C. We're helping to move that needle, and we need you to help us with that. September 17th, CHD is back in D.C. with Senator Ron Johnson, Senator Rand Paul, Representative Paul Gosar, who has excellent legislation, and tons of heroes of the medical freedom movement you see on the screen here, and more to be announced. Go to chdconference.org, get your tickets, reserve, and if you can, go to the fundraiser dinner where we're honoring Ron Johnson. Please do. This helps to keep us going. If your involvement, if you don't show up, CHD is not going to be able to keep this going. But I'm sure people are going to show up. Mary, they remember how great our conferences were, our advocacy day. I'm positive they are going to show up. Mary Holland, thank you so much for coming on. All the amazing work you do. I'm just so blessed to work with you and to be one of your deputies. Thank you so much for everything, Mary.
Thank you, Michael. Bye, everybody.
Okay, so before we show another People study about the hospital protocols, a couple of things. Thursday here at CHDTV is now movie day, and this first Thursday, we're going to kick it off with The Real Anthony Fauci, the movie. This is the movie that is based off of the best-selling book, The Real Anthony Fauci, written by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., while he was then chairman of Children's Health Defense. This movie will be showing on Thursday. So every Thursday, we're going to be showing a movie. We got lots of great movies to show. And to kick it off with Traff, The Real Anthony Fauci, is a great way to go. And also, don't forget, or maybe you don't know, CHD is available on Roku TV. If you have Roku TV, you can download the CHD TV app for free on Roku, and it is easy to do. It is free, and then you could have all the CHD TV content accessible easily, just like this, through Roku TV on the main TV in your home. All right, that's about it for me. Don't go anywhere, because as we just talked about, the hospital protocols, Senator Ron Johnson is going to hold a public event on C-SPAN, getting this information out. And here's where we learned about a lot of that stuff. We learned about a lot of that stuff with Polly Tommy in a bus, traveling the country, getting microphones and cameras into your faces, right into the faces of real people to tell their story. And let's get one of those real stories right now.
We're live, so can you tell everyone your name, please?
My name is Crystal Creel Cart.
And this is about your mummy?
My mom, yes.
Yeah. All right. Did your mum take the COVID-19 shots?
No, she did not.
Why did she want to take it?
She had questions about it and wasn't comfortable yet. She was doing a little bit of research and we were discussing it, and she just didn't feel that it may be safe or not.
All right.
She just didn't know.
So what happened and she ended up in hospital?
Okay, what happened was that one morning, very early in the morning, she had fallen asleep in the recliner watching television, and she got up to go to the restroom and slipped and fell right at her recliner and broke her hip. She didn't know it at the time. She just knew she was in pain, and she called my sister, who came and helped her get back in the chair. And my sister tried to talk her into letting her call an ambulance, because she could tell Mom was in a great deal of pain. And my mom suffered from osteoporosis. She was 77 years old, but she was a very healthy 77 years old. And the only thing that she took was the calcium for her osteoporosis, as well as thyroid medication, and otherwise she was good as far as her health was concerned.
Right, so she ended up in hospital not because of COVID.
No.
But because she broke a hip.
Correct. What happened was, this happened on a Friday, and of course, close to the weekend. a lot of times you can't get in to see someone. And so she was, finally after a couple of days, we talked her into going to the ER, and she went to the ER and was seen there, and they said yes, in fact, she had broken her hip and she needed to see a specialist. And she had an appointment on Tuesday to actually go and see a specialist, and they indicated that she did in fact break her hip and she needed surgery. So they hospitalized her in order to do the surgery. But while she was in the waiting room, they tested her for COVID and said she was positive, but she had no symptoms whatsoever of COVID.
Okay, so she's suddenly positive with a broken hip.
Right.
So what do they do with her next?
So my niece was actually the one who took her because, a lot of other people had to work and so on and so forth. So it ended up being my niece, who was at the time very pregnant. I think she was 7 or 8 months along, actually. And she stayed with my mother the whole time because she knew once she left after a COVID diagnosis that no one would be in to see my mother again. And my mother suffered from something called white coat syndrome. She was very afraid of hospitals, and so she did her best to stay with my mother as long as she possibly could. At one point she needed to use the restroom, and they said if you go out into the hallway to use the restroom, you can't come back in. So they brought her a cup to pee in, excuse me, but that's the facts of the matter. And eventually when they took Mom up to the room, she had to leave, and it was at that point that she left my mother at the hospital.
And are you communicating via text with your mum?
No, my mom wasn't much into that, but we were communicating through my niece, who has some nursing experience. And she was my mother's power of attorney because of her medical background. And she was on the phone with the doctors and nurses constantly, finding out what Mom's condition was and that. So she was admitted on September the 14th, and the one text that I sent to my niece, who was her medical power of attorney, was do not let them give her remdesivir. Because at that point I had already had enough questions of my own that I had done some research, and I was by no means well versed, or I would have gone to the hospital and taken my mother out of there. But I said, do not let them give her remdesivir, and she said, oh my goodness, they already have. They gave her an IV with remdesivir in it before she left the emergency room. And I have the medical records that show that indicate that.
What about the broken hip, or do we not care about that now she's got COVID?
Well, she had, it was like not the primary thing anymore. It switched from her having a broken hip to, this total concentration on her COVID situation. They said they couldn't do anything until they had resolved the COVID issue. And
did she die with a broken hip?
She died with a broken hip, and she was admitted on September the 14th, and she passed away on September 16th, 2 days later, of a heart attack. And what's really upsetting to me is that she died alone. She would have never let one of us die alone. She had 4 children and 20-some grandchildren and several great-grandchildren by this time in her life. And I'd like to tell you about the day before she fell to break her hip, if I may. The day before she fell and broke her hip, she was out in her yard working in her flowers. And my mom lives on a body of water where there's a large bank, 2 large banks that go down to that body of water. And she had been out on her banks, standing on her banks, working in her flowers, and my sister came over and said, Mom, why don't you take a break, and we'll go into town and get an ice cream cone. And my mom went into town with my sister and my sister's grandson, which was my mother's great-grandson, and they got an ice cream cone. And she came back that same evening and stood on the front sidewalk and talked to one of our neighbors for 45 minutes. I mean, my mom was a very social person, and I mean, that's how healthy she was the day before she broke her hip. So we wonder if it wasn't the payouts to the hospital that actually caused them to exacerbate her death, because there's so much money when they're admitted with a COVID diagnosis. There's so much money that's given when they're put on a ventilator. They wanted to put my mom on a ventilator the very last day, and we said no to that. And there's so much money that they receive after a COVID death, actually. And so we looked at the paperwork, and it ended up being over $100,000 that they received for my mother's death. And my mother is listed as the 1,000th death in the state of West Virginia, COVID death in the state of West Virginia. And she went into the hospital for a broken hip. I mean, and here's another very interesting thing. We got her the copy of her medical records with no problem. We went down and signed a release of information, and we got the medical records. And they not only took her vitals on September the 17th, the day after her death, but they recorded her vitals the day after her death.
Why?
Because I believe that the records were falsified, and someone somewhere made a mistake. I mean, how do you explain that? I don't know.
So she gets diagnosed with COVID. She goes straight to a COVID ward and has remdesivir. How many days of remdesivir?
Well, less than 48 hours, a little less than 48 hours. We weren't allowed to see her, of course, while she was, in the hospital, but as soon as she passed, they allowed us to, put on all the protective gear and go into her room. And I remember that I was, putting on all the gear when a nurse approached me and said, "I just want you to know that your mother didn't suffer." And I looked at him and I said, "I don't believe you." And he said, "Are you calling me a liar?" And I said, "Yes. Yes, I am." And it just infuriated me that we could see her after she was gone. I mean, my mother wasn't there anymore. It was her body. And how much more so I would have rather been in there with her, the day before. Or as she was passing, it would have been such a much more comfort to her,
I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
It's tragic. Show us a picture.
Yeah. This is my mother.
Yes. We're going to put a picture of her up on this bus. We're going to sign her name on the outside, but I mean, these people are disgraceful. She went in with a broken hip. She died with a broken hip.
She fell on a Thursday. No, excuse me. She fell on a Friday, and she passed the next Thursday. She didn't even live for a full week after that.
And what was the actual? She had a heart attack?
She had a heart attack. Yes, that was what they put on the
COVID heart attack?
Yes. I forget the exact wording, the exact verbiage, but it was basically heart attack as it related to COVID diagnosis. So it was just something about, I mean, I don't know how anyone could hear these stories and think, oh, well, that makes sense, because none of them make sense. None of them make sense.
Anything else you want to say?
No. I mean, that's it. But I do thank you for the opportunity to tell her story, because I don't want people to forget. And it's still going on. And if you have a loved one who is suffering from COVID, truly suffering from COVID, I would suggest that you do every natural and homeopathic thing that you can do to keep your loved one out of the hospitals, because it's happening everywhere, in every state of the United States and all over the world. Thank you.
This and all CHDTV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.